As a WordPress and Spectra user, you probably want to build modern and responsive websites. And while you may have heard that the Spectra page builder for WordPress brings a whole new level of flexibility by using Flexbox containers, how do you effectively use it with Spectra in the real world? Well, today I'm going to break it down for you with the basic concepts first, and then we will build the page using Flexbox containers with Spectra. Hello, I'm Kay from the Spectra team, and today you will learn all about how to use Flexbox containers with the Spectra page builder. So first of all, what is Flexbox and why should you use it? Well, if we ask Google, Flexbox is a one-dimensional layout system that we can use to create a row or a column axis layout. It makes our life easier to design and build responsive web pages without having to use tricky hacks and a lot of float and position properties in our CSS code. Whether you know it or not, when you are creating your web pages with a page builder like Spectra, CSS code is generated, and by the way, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, which allow to style the HTML code that is generated from your web pages. The traditional way of using CSS is using a two-dimensional layout, which is very handy when you need to display very organized content like a table-like layout, for example. Flexbox is a layout model in CSS that allows you to create flexible and responsive web layouts without relying on floats and positioning. It provides a more efficient way to align and distribute space among items in a container, even when their size is unknown or dynamic. With Flexbox, you can easily specify how elements should be positioned and arranged along a single direction, either horizontally or vertically. The flexible model consists of a flexible container and one or more flexible items. You can adjust the direction, the order, and the alignment of items within a container, and adjust their spacing and wrapping behavior as needed. Now, when to use Flexbox? Well, for example, when you need to create flexible layouts that can easily adapt to all types of devices. For example, here in the desktop version, we want our columns, which are actually containers, to be laid out horizontally. Whereas if I go in tablet mode, we want to stack it vertically. And the same goes for the mobile. Or when you need more flexibility when it comes to positioning elements. For example, you may want to space the items based on the space between, the space around, or space them evenly. Or when you need to create complex and nested layouts, like this layout, where I've nested containers within containers within containers. Now, a word of caution here. It's not because you can do whatever you want with Flexbox that you should. It's a bit like if you were Harry Potter with unlimited magical powers. That doesn't mean you should do crazy things, because this could quickly get messy, and it could become hard to maintain your website. Not to mention that infinite nesting could make your website slower. So enjoy Flexbox, but be reasonable. And I know you are. Yeah, I'm talking about you. So let's take a look at some basic concepts. And here, of course, I'm using Spectra. So the first thing I want to do is to open my list view and make sure I select the correct container. So this is our container here. Next, I'm going to go to the General tab and click on Flex Properties. And the first property I want to show you is the direction. So by default, the direction is going to be row, but I can easily change it to column. Easy, right? Or I could change it to row reverse. So instead of ABC, CBA. And in the same way, I could use column reverse instead of column. So let's put it back into row. Next, we have the alignment property. And this is going to be defined by which direction you're using in the first place. So if you're using the row direction, then the align items property is going to allow you to define the vertical alignment inside this container. So for example, I could align it at the start, flex start, in the middle, that's flex center, flex end, and stretch. So once again, flex start, center, end, and stretch. Let's put it back to default by unselecting the option. Now, as I said, the alignment depends on the direction. So look at this. If I choose column, now the align items defines the horizontal alignment inside this container. So now flex start goes on the left, center in the middle, flex end on the right hand side, and stretch. But in this case, it looks like the flex start position because we've defined a custom width for each container. So let's put it back to center, and let's reset our direction to row. Okay, next, justify content. So justifying content defines the horizontal alignment inside this container. And horizontal because we're using the row direction. So once again, I can align flex start, center, end, but I can also choose space between, space around, and space evenly. So now with Flexbox, it's so easy to justify your content. Let's put it back to center. But now if I change the direction and go to column, as you can see, the icons here have changed because now justify content defines the vertical alignment inside this container. So once again, start, center, end, but we can also space between, space around, and space evenly. Okay, let's put it back to center and let's change the direction back to row. Next, let's talk about the wrap property. So the wrap property defines whether the items are forced into a single line, which is the no wrap option that you see right here, or it can be flowed into multiple lines. And here we have wrap and wrap reverse. So let me show you. I'm just going to duplicate this container. And now don't forget, these containers are actually items within the flexible container. So let me select the flexible container. And now if I select the wrap option, as you can see here on the first line, the container is going to keep as many elements with their original size as possible and then put the rest on the next line. Whereas if we choose no wrap, it's going to keep all elements on one line and resize dynamically. Now, when it comes to the wrap reverse option, as you may have guessed, it's just like the wrap option, but the lines are reversed. Okay, let's put it back to no wrap and let me delete these containers. Okay, but now let's build a real world example, shall we? Okay, so I'm in WordPress and first of all, let's go to Appearance, Themes, and I've installed the Astra theme. And now with the Astra theme installed, I've gone to the dashboard and I've clicked on the Starter Templates tab in order to install a one-click demo. Next, in the search field, I've typed writer and I've installed this starter template, freelance copywriter. And if you want to know how to quickly install a starter template demo, I'll put a link to a tutorial in the description below. Okay, now once I've installed this demo, as you can see, the Spectra WordPress page builder has been automatically installed and activated. So next, I go to Pages, Add New, and I'm creating a new page that I'm going to call Spectra. And the first thing you want to do is click on the little eye icon because we don't want this title to show. Okay, next, you want to click on the Astra settings icon. And in the Content Layout tab, you want to select Full Width Contained. Next, you want to click on the Advanced Settings tab. And where it says Transparent Header, you want to click on Enabled. Then click on Return to Posts. And if you want to know how to set up your transparent header with Astra, I'll put a link to a resource in the description below. Okay, so next, let's create our hero section, which is the top section in our page. So in the top left corner, click on the plus sign and click on Container. So this is a Spectra widget. Container. Okay, now you can select a layout. And we're going to pick this layout with 3 columns. Actually, it looks like columns, but they are containers. So let's click on this one. Okay, next, let's click on the list view icon. And this is going to allow us to see the tree of content, tree of life. And basically here you can see the structure of our page so far. So we have one main container, which is our flexible container. And if I expand, you see we have 3 containers. And like I said, they look like columns, but they are containers within our flexible container. Okay, with our main container selected, you want to make sure that in the top right corner of the page where we open our Astra settings, so just close it. And still in the top right corner, click on the gear icon, General tab, and then click on the Container sub-tab. So the container width should be full width by default. And then for the content width, we're going to click on full width instead of boxed. Next, for the minimum height, click on VH, which stands for viewport height, and give it a value of 100. Next, where you see equal height, enable the option. And now the 3 subcontainers are spread vertically. Okay, now let's take care of our first subcontainer, or column if you prefer to call it like this. So Here in the list view, I'm going to select my first subcontainer. Okay, next, click on the Style tab, click on Spacing. For the row gap, we're going to give it a value of 0, and the same for the column gap. Now, when it comes to the margin, I'm going to unlink the values and give it a bottom margin of 60 pixels. And that's because I want to leave some space between this container and the one we'll create later on. Now that's for the desktop version, but we can already start working on our responsive versions because that's time saved for later. So click on the responsive icon and select tablet. And now that we've already unlinked the values in the desktop version, we can just go to where it says bottom. And here I'm going to type 20. Now let's repeat the same thing for the mobile. 20. Okay, let's go back into desktop mode. And now let's take care of our first subcontainer or column, if you want to call it like this. So in the list view, I'm going to click on the container that I want to target, go to the Style tab and click on Background. Next, in background, I have several options. So I'm going to click on the first one, which is the color option, and I'm going to select a color. Next, click on spacing, and here I'm going to unlink the padding values. So basically the padding is the internal space to this container. So for the desktop, it's going to be 80 pixels on the top, 60 on the right, 80 at the bottom, and 60 pixels on the left hand side. Now let's go into tablet mode, and now it's going to be 60, 40, 60, and 40 pixels. Now always make sure you have the right unit selected. And as you can see, changing the unit is pretty easy. Just click on the one you want and you're all set. Okay, now let's go into mobile mode, and this time it's going to be 40, 20, 40, 20. Okay, let's go back into desktop mode. And now, still with our first column or subcontainer selected, I'm going to click on this icon, the Spectra copy paste. Click on copy style, and then I'm going to select the second subcontainer, click on the Spectra copy paste icon, and click on paste style. Let's repeat the operation for the third one. Great. Now let's change the color so that we can see what we're doing. So let me select the second subcontainer, go to Style, Background, and I'm just going to change the color. And let's repeat the operation for number 3. Okay, next, let me select my first subcontainer, and I'm going to click on the plus sign to add a new widget, and I'm going to add a heading widget. So I'm just going to drag and drop it in the first column, but it's dark and dark so we can't see anything. So with my heading selected, I'm going to go to Style, and I'm going to change the color to white. Okay, now it's easier. So next I go back to the General tab and I want to align it in the center. Okay, great. Next, let me select my text and I'm just going to call it A for a moment. And now with my heading still selected, let me go back into Style, click on the typography icon, and here I'm just going to change the font size to 60 pixels for the desktop version. Then let me click on the responsive icon, go to tablet, typography, and this time it's going to be 50 pixels. And let's go into mobile mode, typography, and this time is going to be 30 pixels. Okay, let's go back to desktop mode. Okay, now still with my heading selected, I'm going to click on the 3 little dots in the toolbar here and click on duplicate. Then I'm going to click on the 6 little dots, which are the drag dots, and I'm just going to drag and drop it in the second column. Let's call it B. Let's repeat the operation, duplicate, drag, third column, and let's call it C. Okay, next, let's select our main container, then go to the General tab, Flex Properties, and as we saw previously, by default, it's set on row. But if you click on column, now our subcontainers are stacked vertically. We just need to take care of how they stretch horizontally. So for that, let's select our first subcontainer, then click on the Container subtab. And for the custom width, make sure you have VW selected, which is the viewport width unit, and let's make it 100%. Now for the minimum height, once again, make sure you click on VH, and we want to give it a value of 34. Next, let's repeat the operation for the second subcontainer. So container, custom width 100 VW. And for the minimum height, click on VH, and this time it's going to be 33. Okay, let's repeat the operation for subcontainer 3. Click on VW 100. And for the minimum height, click on VH and give it a value of 33. And that's simple. That's because we said that the total height of our main container should be 100 VH. So this is basic math. We have 34 plus 33 plus 33 equals 100 VH. Okay, great. And now if we select our main container and go back to Flex Properties, now we can switch between row and column. And that's going to help us down the line for our tablet and mobile versions. Because now if we click on the tablet version, and in case you didn't know, you can access the responsive controls in the top toolbar. So if you click on the tablet version, as you can see, now it's all stacked as it should, and the same for the mobile. So here it may look like it doesn't perfectly fit vertically, but if we go to the front end, as you can see, it's fitting perfectly. So basically, this is just the view that you get within the WordPress editor. Same for the tablet. Let's go to the front end, and as you can see, it's fitting perfectly. Now if we go into the desktop, same thing. Let's go to the front end. As you can see, it's fitting perfectly, but we don't want this layout for the desktop version. So let's go back. Let's select our main container. And here in Flex Properties, for the direction, we're going to select row. So you can totally have one direction for the desktop, a different one for the tablet and for the mobile. So let's click on update. Let's go back to the front end and let's refresh. And there you go. And now if I go to the tablet version and if I refresh, it's changed the layout because by default, if you don't specify which layout you want for each device, it's going to keep the preferences of its parent. And in this case, its parent is the desktop version. So let's go back. And next to direction, we're going to click on the responsive icon, go into tablet mode. And here we're going to specify we want it to be like a column. Let's click on update. Let's go back and refresh. There you go. Now, when it comes to the mobile, it's easier because whatever happens, it's going to use the column behavior by default. But if you want to be sure, once again, click on the responsive icon and specify that you want it to behave as a column. Okay, now that we got that out of the way, let's go back into desktop mode and let's start making some changes to our content. Okay, next let me change the color of the text in the first column. Next, with my heading still selected, I'm going to click on the plus sign on the top left corner and I'm going to add the Spectra buttons widget. So I'm just going to drag and drop it below the heading and I just need one button. So let me select the second one, click on the three dots for the options and remove button. Next, let me select the text and I'm going to change it to read more. Great. And now here on the right hand side, I have a few presets. I'm going to select this preset. So basically it's going to be a rounded button with a transparent background. So if I click on it, it looks like it's still a rectangle, but actually it's because it's all dark on dark, so you can't really see it. But when I hover over it, you can see the hover color. So let's style this. So let's go to the Style tab and let's change the text color to white, the border color to white also, and then let's change our hover color. So click on the hover sub-tab, and for the hover color, our border is going to be this orange color, and the same for the background. So background, hover, and let me change the color. And now when I hover over it, looking great. Now click on spacing, and here where it says padding, I'm going to unlink the values by clicking on this icon. And as I do so, as you can see, the spacing has completely changed in our button, and we don't want that. So we're just going to add custom values. So it's going to be 14 pixels at the top, 40 pixels on the right hand side, 14 pixels at the bottom, and 40 pixels on the left. So once again, make sure you've clicked on pixels for the units. Okay, next let's click on our list view. And as you can see, when we added the widget, it added a buttons container because we had two buttons, remember. So you want to make sure you select the buttons container. And next you want to click on the three dots, click on duplicate, and then we're going to use our drag and drop to drop it just below our heading. Let's repeat the operation, duplicate, and let's drag it underneath our heading. Great, it's starting to take shape. So now let's select our first subcontainer. Then let's go to Style, Background, and we're just going to click on the reset icon, the little twisted arrow here. And that's going to make our column transparent. Let's do the same thing for each other column. So subcontainer 2 and subcontainer 3. Okay, you're going to tell me you can't see anything, but fear not. So next, let's select our main container in the list view, then go to Style, and here we're going to select the third icon, which is the image icon. Click on Change Image, and I've already prepared some images. So let me select my image, and as you may see here, I've labeled this image Desktop, and you'll understand why in a moment. So let me click on Select. Okay, great, now it's starting to look good. Let's take a look at our tablet version. And here it's okay, but if you want, you can change the positioning of the image to have exactly what you want. But what I like to do sometimes is just to create dedicated versions for the tablet and mobile version, because I can then exactly select the framing I want, and also I can optimize for the mobile. Now you don't have to do it all the time, but like I said, it can be pretty handy. So in that case here, because I'm on the tablet version, I'm going to click on the plus sign, and I'm going to select a different image for the tablet version. So I get this one, and as you may have guessed, I labeled it tablet so that it's easier for me to know which is which. So click on select, and there you go. This is exactly the framing I wanted. And the image weight is lower than the desktop version, which is good for optimizing your website for tablet and mobile. So let's repeat the operation. Let's go into mobile mode. Let's click on change image. And this time I'm going to select my mobile version. Click on select, and there you go, perfect framing. Okay, great. Now let's go back into desktop mode. But as you can see in some of the modes, it's not easy to read the text and see the buttons. So let's add an overlay. So back to the desktop mode, still in our style tab, background, and here at the bottom, you're going to see overlay type. So let's click on classic, image overlay color, and I'm going to use this color code here, which is a dark gray with some transparency, and you can set the transparency with the transparency slider. Great. Next, I want to add some lines to make some separation between the subcontainers or columns. So let me select the first one in my list view, then go to Style, Border. In the Style dropdown, let's select Solid, and then where it says Width, I'm going to click on the link icon to unlink the values, and I'm going to give it a right border value of 1. And where it says color, I'm going to select white, and then I'm going to give it some transparency. Let me copy this value, and let's do the same thing for the second column. So container, style, border, solid, unlink the values, right border of 1 pixel, and for the color, I'm just going to replace the color code with the one I just copied. Looking great. Let's click on update. And now if you go back to the front end, let's refresh. Looking good. Now let's go to the tablet version, let's refresh. Looking good, but as you can see, we can't see the border, whereas we can see it here in the desktop version. So let's go back. Let's click on the responsive options to go into tablet mode. Let's select our first subcontainer, go to Style, Border, and now we're going to change it. In the desktop version, it was set on 1 pixels on the right hand side, but here we want it at the bottom. So let me add 1 at the bottom, and let's make sure it's 0 elsewhere. Great, let's repeat the operation for subcontainer 2. Excellent. Let's click on update. And now if we go back to the front end, let's refresh. There you go. Now let's take a look at the mobile version. Let's refresh. And as you can see, the mobile version kept the settings from the tablet version. And usually that's the idea. So the mobile version is going to take the settings from the tablet version, and the tablet version is going to take the settings from the desktop version. So basically you have granular control, but if you set things for the tablet version and you want exactly the same thing for the mobile version, then you don't have to specify it. But if you want to be sure, you can always do it. So far so good. This is our desktop version, this is our tablet version, and this is our mobile version. Okay, let's go back into desktop mode. And now we're going to create another section. And to be precise, we're going to create another main container. Make sure that you collapse the hero section and that the main container is selected. And then we're going to click on the plus sign in the top left corner and click on container. Now scroll down and now you can select a layout. So you can either select this one or this one, which looks closer to what we want to build. Let's click on our list view, and with our second main container selected, let's go to the General tab, Container, and let's change the content width to full width. Next, for the minimum height, you want to click on VH, and let's give it a viewport height of 85. Next, enable the equal height option, then click on the Style tab, Spacing. The row gap should be set to 0 and the column gap should be set to 40 pixels. Once again, make sure pixels are selected. Next, for the padding, I'm going to unlink the values and give it a padding, or in other words, an internal spacing of 0 at the top, 60 pixels on the right hand side, 0 at the bottom, and 60 pixels on the left hand side. Now let's go into responsive mode, click on the responsive icon, tablet, and you want to make sure it says 0 all across, and the same for the mobile. But by default it's set to 0. Okay, let's go back into desktop mode. And for the margin, once again, we want to unlink the values, and we want to give it 60 pixels of margin at the bottom. And in this case, we're going to keep it the same for the tablet and the mobile versions. We can always change it later if needs be. Okay, next in the list view, expand our second section by clicking on the little arrow. And let's select our second subcontainer. Then go to the General tab, Container, and make sure it's set to percentage and 25 as a value. Next, let's select the first subcontainer. Once again, go to General, make sure it's set to percentage and 75, which it should be by default if you selected the same layout that I did. Okay, next, still with our first subcontainer selected, go to Style, and where it says Background, you want to select the third option, which is Image. Click on Change Image, and once again, we're going to select our desktop version. Then let's go into responsive mode, and you know the drill now. Click on Change Image, let's select our tablet version. Then let's go into mobile mode, click on Change Image, and let's select our mobile version. Now, if we go back to the tablet version, as you can see, it's not really going to work out because in the second column, our subcontainer, we want to create a sidebar. That's going to be a bit too narrow. So the idea is to have the first section taking 100% of the width, and then the sidebar will come just below, which is the way it's going to be on the mobile. So for that, let's select our englobing container, which is our second section, as we called it. Then go to the General tab, Flex Properties, and this time where it says Direction, we want to select Column. Oh, that looks worse, but don't panic. So now we can select our first subcontainer, go to Container, click on VW for Viewport Width, and let's make it 100%. And for the minimum height just below, make sure you click on VH, and let's give it a value of 85. And there you go. Now, while we're at it, let's do the same thing for our second subcontainer. So in the list view, click on the second subcontainer. For custom width, click on VW. Let's give it 100. But in this case, we're not going to give it a minimum height. Okay, let's go back into the desktop mode. Make sure you select the first subcontainer. Let's go back to Style, Background, and then at the bottom where it says Overlay Type, click on Classic, click on the Image Overlay Color, and I'm going to replace it with this color code, which is a very dark gray with some transparency. Next, you want to click on the Spacing subtab, unlink the values, and for the desktop version, it's going to be 80 pixels on the top, 60 pixels on the right, 80 at the bottom, and 60 pixels on the left. And let's take care of our tablet version. This time it's going to be 60, 40, 60, 40. And for the mobile version, it's going to be 40, 20, 40, 20. Okay, let's go back into desktop mode. Next, let's click on the plus icon to add a new widget. And let's drag and drop a heading widget. Now, once again, it's dark and dark, that's why you can't see anything. So go to the Style tab with your heading selected. Click on Color, let's make it white. Then click on the General tab and let's align it in the middle. And now let me double click and change the text. Next, click on the plus sign to add a new widget. And we want to add an info box widget from Spectra. So let me drag it just below our heading. And once again, dark and dark. So let's click on the Style tab and let's change the icon image color to white. Same thing for our title and the same for our description. Now let me change the text by this one and the title by this one. And then I'm just going to click on the options icon, click on duplicate, and do it one more time. And let me just change the titles. Okay, let's save our work. Next, let's click on our list view icon. Then let's collapse our first subcontainer and let's click on the second subcontainer, our column. Next, click on the General tab, Flex Properties. Now leave the options as is, but if you want to double check, direction is set to column, align items center, justify content center, and the wrap option set to no wrap. Now, if you go into tablet mode, it's going to take all the options from the desktop mode, and if you go into mobile mode, by default, it's set to wrap instead of no wrap. And that could be tricky, and I will show you why later. But in our case, for this design, we want to set it to no wrap. Okay, let's go back into desktop mode. And next, you want to click on the Style tab, Background, select Color, and let's pick a dark color. Okay, let's close this. Next, click on Spacing. So the row gap should be set to 0 and the same for the column gap. Now when it comes to the padding, I'm going to unlink the values. And for the desktop, it's going to be 80 pixels on top, 40 pixels on the right hand side, 80 at the bottom, and 40 on the left. Now let's go into tablet mode. And here it's going to be 60, 40, 60, 40, all in pixels. And for the mobile version, 40, 20, 40, 20 pixels. Now let's go back into desktop mode. And for the margin, it's going to be 0 all across and the same for tablet and mobile. So we don't need to change it there. Okay, next, let me select my heading in the first column, then click on the options, duplicate, and I'm just gonna drag it in our second column, and I'm gonna change it to projects. Next, click on the Style tab, bottom spacing should be set to 0, then go into spacing, and it's going to be 0 padding all across, and the same for the margin. Okay, next, still with our heading selected, I'm going to click on the plus sign to add a new widget, and I'm going to add the Spectra tabs widget, so let me drag and drop it just below our heading. And as you can see, the whole thing is centered in the middle. So before we take care of our tabs, let's select our container. So let's click on the list view, let's click on our second subcontainer, our column, then go to General, Flex Properties, and here it says Justify Content, we can change the vertical alignment. So I want to align it at the top. Okay, looks better. Okay, next, let me select my tabs widget. And first of all, I'm going to delete tab number 3. So I just hover over the tab, click on the little icon to remove the tab. Then I'm going to select the text in the first tab, and I'm going to call it Project 1. And the second is going to be Project 2. So when I click on each, you don't see the difference because it's the same text. So with Project 2 selected, I'm just going to change the first few words. And now when you click on Project 1 and 2, you can see the difference in the text, but it's not really visible. So let's make some changes. So with the text selected here, I can change the color and let's set it to white. Great, next let's click on the plus sign to add a new widget. This time I'm going to start typing separator and I'm just going to drag and drop it just below our tabs widget. And now you want to click on the separator widget. Once again, if you want to be sure, click on the list view, make sure the widget is selected. And where it says color, I'm just going to change the color to this one. And next, I'm going to click on my heading, click on the options, duplicate. And I'm just going to drag it below our separator. And the same for our tabs widget. So select our tabs widget, duplicate. And once again, let me drag it just below our heading this time. Let's update. And before we go further, let me show you once again the wrap no wrap feature. So here I'm going to duplicate this widget a few times. Now let's select our first column and then let's change the direction to row. And as you can see here, it's set to no wrap. So it's all on one line. But if I wanted, I could just click on the wrap option and then it will be back to what we had when the direction was set to column. And as mentioned, if I want to reverse the order, I can choose the wrap reverse. Okay, but for the time being, let's put it back how it was. So no wrap and column direction. And let me just get rid of these. And let's save our work. Now, if we go back, let's refresh our page. And now let's scroll down and there you go. We got a banner here and we got our sidebar. And if we take a look at the tablet version, it's looking beautiful. Now the first subcontainer in this section is taking 85% of viewport height, which is what we specified. And then we have the sidebar just below. And last but certainly not least, the mobile version following the same principle. Now I noticed that the text here is gray, whereas I thought we specified it should be white, but actually when you look closer, when you click on project 2, then it's white because we only set it for project number 2, whereas project number 1 is still that gray color. So let's go back to WordPress. So let's click on project 1, let's select our text, and now we can change the text color to white. And now it's working fine when we switch. Okay, let's do the same thing for the second one. Actually, let's change this to writing, editing, and let's change this title to skills. So let's select writing. As you can see, the text is gray. Let's click on the text, text color, white. Great. Now let's click on update. Let's go back and now let's refresh and there you go. Now let me collapse our subcontainers or columns and let's select subcontainer number 2. Let's go into mobile mode. And if you recall, I told you earlier on that in our case, we wanted to use the no wrap option, whereas by default for the mobile, it was set to wrap. So let me put it back to wrap. Let's click on update. Now let's go back and let's refresh. And as you can see, it's not centered the way we want now. And that's because of this option. Because some of the content here might be larger, and because the mobile version is narrow, that it can introduce these kind of visual bugs, which are not bugs actually, because it's working exactly the way it's supposed to be. So if you ever run into this issue, make sure you go back to WordPress and try with the various wrap options. So let me put it back to no wrap, update. Let's go back, refresh, and there you go. Looking nice. If you've made it up to here, congratulations! You should now be pretty comfortable with using Flexbox container with the Spectra page builder for WordPress. Because today you've learned what is Flexbox and how to use it, what are its basic concepts and how to use it within Spectra, and how to use this new knowledge to create modern responsive custom layouts. And if for some reason you haven't used the Spectra page builder for WordPress yet, you'll find a handy link in the description below. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And if you want more content about Spectra, Astra, and web design in general, make sure you subscribe and smash the notification bell so that you don't miss any of the content that we publish.